I snapped this picture of the American Apparel store at my local mall. And of course, you'll have probably heard about the all the talk about this advertising campaign uh, by American Apparel featuring Sydney Sweeney. That's the girl in the picture there, and this, the whole the whole thing, the certain angry and aggrieved, perpetually aggrieved people on the left side of the spectrum are saying this is coded language. Sydney Sweeney has great genes. It's of course meant to be a pun, and in the commercials she talks about genes being things that are handed down from one generation to the next, and so she says my genes are blue, and yeah, it's a cheeky sort of campaign. But it's it's caught people's attention, and for understandable reasons. So even though the controversy is ridiculous, of course, but I want not just to talk about how leftists are flailing and calling it Nazi propaganda and and that kind of stuff, which maybe in retrospect that was almost that kind of thing you almost would expect. It almost seems to be baiting that kind of response from some people, and I think that's what's funny about the campaign. Also, but the other thing about it is it's of course has been talked about a few times. It's American Apparel going back to having a beautiful woman be their their model, as opposed to doing what corporations did so often over the course of the last several years, where they would just say, "Hey, everybody's beautiful, so here, let's roll out some big 300-pound, ugly transvestite black man who says he's a woman, and or let's put Dylan Mulvaney in a dress, and yeah, this is how we're this is how we're going to go forward. This is how we're going to win new fans and so forth, and all those quote unquote woke. It's almost old to call it woke. It gets tiresome, but it's still, the shoe still fits. All this woke stuff hasn't worked. I mean, as far as getting them done, if it's being done to virtue signal to get ESG kind of funds or what have you, that's fine. But as far as alienating a good portion of the audience, that's not so fine. And the difference here with this particular campaign of American Apparel is their sales have shot way up since the beginning of their use of Sydney Sweeney in these commercials. So one suspects that in this case correlation is causation. That the advertisements have had a positive effect on the company, on their sales. But again, I don't want to just do the sort of thing that I think most other people on YouTube do. People who approach this from an anti-woke perspective. Just they just sort of say, "Boy, these liberals are being stupid. They're being ridiculous. And so aren't they? Go woke, go broke, etc. and so on." What I want to say, what I want to draw attention to, is the fact that this kind of advertisement is, used to be very, very, very much the norm. Like back in, when I was your age, when I was growing up, when I was a teenager in the '80s, when I was a young man when I was in my 20s in the '90s, this was just normal. Like you would have a bunch of glamorous looking, mostly white, very attractive people be the models for some, some clothing outfit or what have you, and that was just expected, and nobody complained about it except it was just sort of what my response at the time was like, this is just shallow. This is like, I was just like, I wasn't a big fashion maven, if you can believe that, and I'm still not one. But I don't think it would have occurred to me. It certainly wouldn't have occurred to me that sometime in the future, corporations would start pushing, having unattractive people, having rotund, dykish looking women, or men pretending to be women, be the ones that they use as their models. That just didn't. I just never thought that would happen. But here's why it's happened, and this is something I've talked about before. It's something I've written about before. I wrote about how the Cold War, the end of the Cold War, brought about, unleashed a demon in the West. And what I mean by that is that up until the end of the Cold War, which was can be dated from the time that the Soviet Union fell. So that was really something that it was a process that started in 1989 when the Berlin Wall came down, and it was all over but the shouting by that time. But it's still, the Soviet Union still limped on under the title the Soviet Union until 1991, when it was officially dissolved and it was no more. But once the writing was on the wall, so to speak, speaking of the wall, once the Berlin Wall came down and it was clear where things were headed, that was when you suddenly had this explosion of what was then called political correctness. It's the same. It's the same phenomenon that's called wokeness today. It's anti-white. It's anti-male. It's fetishizing of diversity, quote unquote, fetishizing of anything that's non-white. And you saw its manifestation. You didn't see it manifest itself until. You didn't see it manifest itself until the end of the Cold War. And my theory is that the cultural movers and shakers, those in charge of large corporations and those are who pull the strings, the opinion shapers, if you will, that they had a vested interest in telling Middle America, hey, we're on your side. We're going to reflect. We're going to show positive depictions of you in our commercials, in our television sitcoms, in our movies, and that was the case. There was no effort to push cultural diversity, except in certain very circumscribed ways. There was in the '80s there was the Buddy movie, which were, where they paired a white guy and a black guy. But that wasn't really subversive of anything. It was just, it was showing, masculine. It was actually just affirming masculinity just across racial lines. I mean, that's even in They Live, speaking of this motif, with Roddy Piper and his friend. I can't remember the name of the actor, the black guy who plays his friend. But it was also in 48 Hours with Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy, and of course Lethal Weapon, Danny Glover and Mel Gibson, and I think it seems like there were a couple other instances of that also. But generally speaking, you had affirmations of quote unquote whiteness. It's mostly these cultural Marxist types who talk about whiteness these days. But if we can reflect on whiteness as a phenomenon, not in an overtly negative way, but just as a cultural phenomenon, you go back and look at the kind of commercials that ran, that, you would, if there was ever a couple that was shown, they would be a white couple, a white heterosexual couple. You rarely saw a mixed race couple, and you never saw a homosexual couple in any in any commercial or featured in any major movie or anything like that. It just wasn't done. And the reason why I think this wasn't done at the time was because for those in charge, it was important to signify to the people that we're with you. We like Middle America. We like traditional masculinity. We like traditional femininity. We like good church-going families, and we like these. It was hokey a lot of the time, and it was obviously not sincere, but nevertheless it was there. It was consistently there amongst the aesthetic that was pushed and by major corporations and so forth, on television and movies, what have you. And then that changed after the Cold War ended, because now the Middle America, whereas before it was like we might end up in an apocalyptic confrontation with the Eastern Bloc. These two forces, two tribes going to war, that might play out, and we need, in that scenario, we need Middle America. We need the men of Middle America, predominantly white, predominantly Christian. We need them. But after the end of the Cold War, and it was then said to be the end of history, and it was just widely perceived, I think, by the elites that they didn't need to flatter the Middle America types anymore. They didn't need to show beautiful white people anymore. In fact, that's when it, just shitting on white people, shitting on whiteness, just being negative, promoting what's been called the culture of critique, or what have you, just cultural Marxism, promoting this idea that white people are bad, and white institutions are bad. And of course, when they do this, they're always pointing their finger at the little people. They're never pointing their fingers at themselves and saying we're bad. It's always you're You're the bad people. You're the miscreants. Just like they do with the global warming stuff. You out there are responsible for global warming, and so it's up to you. You must pay these global warming taxes, but corporations don't have to do anything because we're virtuous people. So this whole idea of corporate virtue signaling didn't really start until the end of the Cold War, and then as time went on, as we got into the 2010s, and especially right around the mid-teens, it really started kicking up in earnest. And I have, lots of ideas about why that was happening, why that began happening to such a degree, to such an extent. But I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here. If you're interested, read my essay. Again, the Cold War unleashed a demon in the West. You can read it on my Substack page. But what makes this campaign stand out is that it's knowingly and with a twinkle in the eye. It's going against it's going against the cultural Marxist stuff. It's going against the promotion of the demoralization campaign that was the promotion of ugliness and vileness and wretchedness and taking ugly people and calling them beautiful. The thing they were trying for a little while that went under the benign heading of body positivity. This is obviously flying in the face of all of that. The people who say this is an example of and maybe this portends something new. I don't know. It's hard to say at this point. But the people who say this is Nazi propaganda, all you have to do is point out to them who owns American Apparel, who are the owners of this clothing franchise. They're Jews. Do you really think the Jews who own American Apparel want to promote Nazi propaganda? You really think that's what's going on here? you geniuses. You really think that's the play? No. That's not what's happening here. But I do want to say that I do want to point out, the relevance of this contextually speaking as a part of history. Why they're doing it right now, maybe it's just because, it's gotten more, woke has kind of come under more and more fire. DEI is under more and more fire. Maybe the play right now, maybe there's about to be another turn. But we have to understand that whatever they're promoting now, it's still the same people doing it. They're just changing tack. And why are they changing tack now? That's a question that should interest us. It interests me, although I don't have all the answers. Anyway, those are some thoughts on the American Apparel Sydney Sweeney campaign. Please tell me what you think. Leave your thoughts below.